All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to our live stream with Made of Millions, the fourth in our five-part series from Generation Change with Made of Millions and our Stanford Psychiatry Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing. I'm Vicki Harrison. I'm a program director with the Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing, Stanford Psychiatry, and I have the privilege of working with this great panel of young people. We're going to talk about the topic of media and mental health, particularly youth mental health, which is a pretty big topic. We're going to try to address it broadly, but then we're going to dig a little bit into social media, which is what a lot of people are concerned about. But we're going to talk a little bit about entertainment and news media as well. And our goals are really to highlight the way that media in general impacts mental health and to explore some ideas for what can be done to make it more positive. So I mentioned my great panel here. I want them to introduce themselves. We're going to just have a conversational format mostly, and we have picked some questions together that we'll get through, and then hopefully we can take some audience questions for those of you who have tuned in. So the first question is going to go we're going to go through and do introductions and then answer this first question, which our panelists picked, which was brave of them, which shows how authentic they're going to be on today's live stream. So I'm going to kick it over to Joshua, who volunteered to go first. So if you could just introduce yourself and answer this question, which is, think of a day this week and say how much time you've spent consuming media one time this week.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Joshua Yang. I'm a senior at Henry M. Gunn High School in Palo Alto, California. And geez, how much time have I spent consuming media today? You know, when we first drafted this question, I didn't really think about it, but then I started thinking about it. And then in the days since we've drafted the question, I've tried to reduce it. So I've been doing better, but it probably is still like 2 to 3 hours a day, if not more. I'm going to go ahead and call on Jeremy.
Okay, my name is Jeremy. I'm a junior at Palo High School, and mine is going to be way more than Joshua's. It's like 10 hours now because I'm not sleepy anymore. But yeah, I'm gonna call on Emily Chang.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a junior at St. Francis High School, and I would say every day I spend at least an hour and a half, maybe upwards of 3, depends. And Zoe and Kira, either one of you. Go for it.
I'm Kira. I'm a second-year student at UC San Diego. And as for my computer, I spend about 6 hours a day, I want to say, doing stuff. And then as for my phone, probably like 3 hours. So kind of a lot.
Yeah, and then I'm Zoe, and I'm also a second year at UC San Diego. And let's see, I think on my computer, we're pretty much on the computer doing school all the time. So probably like 6 hours. And then I looked at my phone today and it was like 4 hours. And then at night we watch like at least an hour or 2 of TV. So we're pretty much on different forms of media like all day long.
Thank you all for sharing that and being brave with throwing out those numbers. I think it's interesting how you each had different numbers, and also sometimes it's hard to know. And when we talk about how much time we're on the phone, you kind of wonder what you're doing on the phone. And so I think that is something that people have started to recognize, that screen time is not necessarily what it used to be, or this word that people used to think meant something negative, that it depends what you're doing in media. There's a lot, we're using media for school right now, for everything right now during the pandemic. And so not all media is the same. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. And as I was mentioning earlier, we have the different streams of media. It might be entertainment, it might be educational, it might be news, it might be social, it might be gaming. And but really, a lot of us are accessing it through one device. It's all coming through our device. And so it's important just to know where it's coming from. And that has implications when we want to do something about it and start changing the way that it's conducted. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us into our first question of the panel, which is, why are we here talking about this topic? Why should we care about media and mental health? So I think Kira was going to go first on this one.
Yeah, so I think we should care about media messages in mental health, whether they're positive or negative, just because I think a lot of the times we internalize these messages a lot more than we actually realize. I know for myself, I kind of didn't pay attention in the past to the sort of messages I was getting from social media, just because I wasn't really going on it as much as my friends at the time. So I just figured like, oh, there's no way this could like actually be impacting my mental health or my thoughts. But at the end of the day, when I thought about it a little bit more, the content I was seeing like was kind of negative and did cause me to internalize some of these more negative thought processes. So I would just say, like, regardless of how much time you're spending on social media, whatever content you're seeing still is going to have an impact on your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that I would kind of follow that with like, as like we all talked about, we all spend a lot of time on social media and just like media in general, and sort of what Kira was saying, like I think we just don't really think about all the message that we're taking, especially because like so many of them are just like normal things like in society that you like don't notice all the time, but in reality like they do shape a lot of the ways that we think about different concepts or different ideas. And then kind of even further and specifically around mental health, I think that we should care about media messages because for people who are struggling and are having a harder time, like they can be more susceptible. I mean, I've certainly found that like if I'm in a really hard place, like I can be more susceptible to what I'm seeing. And so even for those people out there who feel like it doesn't really impact them or like it doesn't really matter, there's no doubt that like when someone is struggling, if they see something that is kind of only going to push them further down that hole, like it does have a very real impact. And like we've seen that time and time again, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. And so at the end of the day, like it is also a matter of safety and in terms of like how people are in their mental health. And it can really have like serious consequences, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kira and Zoe summed it up really well, where media messages, whether you know it and are aware of it or not, like you learn so much about what people expect from you, and you just gain these little notions of what you should be and how you can portray it. And that definitely can damage your mental health when you don't, when you aren't exactly prepared for it, right? And specifically talking about youth mental health and why it's so important is that it's so universal. Like everyone has their mental health, but if you don't have this awareness of it and it's just being perpetuated negatively through social media or whatever media you engage in, kind of like Zoe's talking about, it can definitely be very damaging. And I do feel like there's still kind of stigma around talking about mental health when it really is such a real subject for so many people, and we can't just ignore it.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. We internalize a lot of the media we consume, and especially now with the algorithms pushing more things at us, if we fall down like a rabbit hole, it will lead us further down. So, and you can see that like in public perception. If media talks about a certain topic and they talk about it in a certain way, public perception will sway, and so will your brain when they talk about mental health. And I think it's very important to look at it carefully.
Yeah, definitely. And, to add on to what everybody else has said, I just think especially like the social aspect of it, of social media in general, where there's just a lot of surface level interaction, right? You see a lot of people that you sort of know, acquaintances, and it's less even focus on celebrity type figures. And so I was reading about this a little earlier, and it said that when you're comparing yourself to people online, you're most likely to compare yourself to acquaintances. And the reason why is with celebrities, you're sort of aware, at least on a conscious level, that celebrities have this very artificially crafted image, right? So you don't tend to compare yourself as strongly, even if you do to a certain extent. For your close friends, they're your close friends. You know that their lives aren't perfect. But with acquaintances, you really don't know what their lives are like. But when you see that image, it's a lot easier for you to draw that comparison. And I think that's something that has been reinforced by social media instead of just media. You know, it's the difference between picking up a celebrity magazine and now, a few decades later, scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and what have you.
Thank you all. Those are great points. I really think that's a really interesting piece of research that you picked up on, Joshua. And I think it is something that this generation has to deal with that the previous generations didn't, because we didn't have influencers and acquaintances that were so readily available and posting such visual images. So thank you for sharing that. So Zoe, you had mentioned safety and how consuming media can be a safety issue. That puts us into our next question, which is around safety. And I know you're familiar with some of the recommendations that the mental health community has created for both the entertainment industry and journalists around safe reporting and portrayal of media and mental health. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there is sort of a set of recommendations, as Vicki said, that you can find online at the American Association of Suicidology. And it is essentially a list that has been made for specifically like journalists and news media, but also kind of all types of media could certainly learn a thing or two from them. But it essentially kind of instructs those people who are writing these articles on how to report on suicide or on serious mental health issues in a way that is safe and is not sort of problematic for people in the community who are like around this person who has died by suicide. And a lot of it is kind of focused on language or what types of pictures you're showing and making sure sort of not to sensationalize this like very real issue. And I personally think that journalists have a very real responsibility to follow them. I, like Joshua, went to Gunn High School, and my high school, Gunn, had multiple suicide clusters, one in 2009 and another in 2014, which was right as I was entering high school. So I knew youth who had friends and family who died during that suicide cluster. And then one example of an article that really tore my community apart a little bit was from the Atlantic magazine. And it was all about sort of like, why are these kids in Palo Alto killing themselves? Like that was like the name of the article. And people had really pushed this journalist to follow the reporting guidelines and pay attention. And she just didn't at all. And it was really damaging for my community. I think that, I remember being in 8th grade or 9th grade and reading that article and just like, really, it was really damaging for me. It was damaging for the people who I was around who knew some of, like, it was their friends who were dying. And it was just like an article that ended up doing a lot of damage and people struggled more, or I think more and more people needed resources just because of that article. And it did have a really real impact. And at the end of the day, I mean, they say about news, right, that it both kind of reflects what's going on in society and creates what's going on in society at the same time. And so they certainly have sort of a special position where they can sort of represent society in a way, but also push society in a certain direction. And so I think that if they were to take these guidelines seriously and sort of start using different language and talking about suicide and mental health differently, I think it really could end up making an impact for everybody who's reading the news, which is most people.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's just you have to be very specific about the language you use, I think, especially when reporting just because of the amount of connotation. So committed suicide versus died by suicide is a really great example, because the word committed is tied to, like, this person committed murder, this person committed arson. It almost has that connotation of crime. And then when you're talking about suicide clusters, you don't want to call them an epidemic, because again, that also has certain connotations. But I also think in general, beyond just like these very specific uses of language and word choice, you should also think a little bit about the way that we're doing coverage in general. This is a little bit tangential and not quite related to mental health, but I was reading this great Q&A with a journalist from Florida, and the question was, okay, since you're based in Florida, I got to ask this question: what's your favorite Florida man / Florida woman story that you've covered? And the journalist responded, yeah, so these stories about like this Florida man did something crazy, I mean, it's funny and people will click on it. But really what you have to understand is these stories and these crimes are the result of inequality and the result of, people from impoverished neighborhoods, from lower income backgrounds, doing whatever they have to do to survive, or people with mental health illnesses that have gone undiagnosed. And so really when you're reporting on the classical like Florida man story, you shouldn't be reporting on any specific individuals to mock them. You should be reporting on the institutions that have led to what's happening. So it's sort of the same thing with mental health, right? You don't want to be sensationalizing the graphic details of any one particular incident, but you want to be reporting on the institutions and the norms that have led to that event. And the journalist had a great phrase for it, which is, you don't want to punch down, you want to punch up in your reporting.
I want to just add on to that really quick. I think it's a really important point in terms of this like sensationalizing these like very real issues. And I think that if you look at media's choices in general, sort of outside, it can be in the news or just like general TV or movies, like there is certainly a primary element of like romanticizing or sensationalizing to sort of like catch people and get people to click and to read and to pay attention. But especially in terms of like reporting, suicide contagion, specifically in suicide clusters, is very real, which is where within a suicide cluster sort of
She froze.
am I back?
You're back.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's reported on in certain ways or sort of talked about in certain ways, then that can ultimately lead to other people and other youth deciding to take their lives. And if that, like, I just think that even if that's a question or something that could possibly happen, then like, why wouldn't you follow a list of like 20 recommendations that could save youth's lives,
Very well said. Yeah, and I mean, thank you both for sharing that. And I mean, you have more expertise on this topic than a lot of the journalists we're hoping to reach with this message. Some of it is because of your own personal experience. So thank you for sharing that. I think that there's a lot of people that just don't understand the contagion effect and don't take it seriously. And I personally think a lot of it has to do with mental health stigma, that it's not given as much credibility as we want it to be. So I hope that's going to change. Jeremy, did you have any other thoughts on that question, or the question of whether you think journalists have a responsibility?
Yeah. As someone, I'm currently in the journalism like path in Pali. So and one of the things we like learn about is, like journalistic integrity, following guidelines, because those things can be very, very important, right? Like it's not just mental health, not just suicide, right? It's like COVID-19. Anything important, you have to follow those guidelines, or else your message could go so many different ways. And it's kind of sad when I see articles that like obviously never did even try following the guidelines at all, and then just spread disinformation and sadness and hate everywhere, I guess. Yeah. And I think like as your job as a journalist, you have to make sure what you're reporting is accurate and factual, and it doesn't harm others. So I think that are very important. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Well, let's move into the next question, which is switching a little bit into social media. A lot of people aren't sure what to think of social media when it comes to youth mental health. I'm sure that you've all seen the headlines. I mean, Zoe, you mentioned a different Atlantic article, but they also had a pretty sensational one that was titled "Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation?" It was in 2017. Some of you have seen The Social Dilemma, probably, that came out. So there's a lot of controversy and debate about the impact of social media and how it could be harming youth mental health. So we want to ask you, on your opinion, what do you think about social media? Do you think the concerns that people have about social media's negative impacts on youth mental health are valid? So let's start with Joshua.
Sure. I mean, it's a mixed bag, right? Social media, especially when it was first coming out, everybody hailed it as this grand opportunity. And in some sense of the phrase, it has delivered on that. You know, there are just so many different opportunities that you have access to through social media, and especially in the pandemic, you know, like suddenly it doesn't matter whether I'm talking with panelists from Palo Alto, California, the Bay Area, or like somewhere like Brazil or Japan. But at the same time, you know, I think we need to do a better job of addressing the flip side of the coin, which is, again, that negative impact. And honestly, we have only had widespread social media use for maybe a decade, maybe 15 years. And it's going to take some time to really see the lasting effects on social media. I know there's great work being done already on adolescent development and interacting on social media, but it's going to take years before we see the full brunt of the impact. And that's something I think we all should be concerned about. And it's definitely something I'm thinking about too, right? Just a few days ago, the Instagram app on my phone glitched for some reason. It completely reset my Explore feed. So for the first time when I was scrolling through my Explore feed, it wasn't like I click on something and then I click on something else. It was just like, I have no interest in this. And that just got me thinking, wow, I've gotten to a point where if I have nothing else to do, I open up Instagram and go to the Explore tab. And now that I was deprived of that, I began realizing just how much time it was taking up and just how much attention it was sucking.
Thank you. Jeremy, do you want to share?
Yeah. I use social media a lot, social media has changed my life. I have met half my friends on there, but I think a lot of people don't realize is that sometimes it can be toxic, and you have to it's hard to see that until you feel very off. And I think that was like me like 2 years ago when I stopped using Instagram, where I was like, this is actively making me feel bad, and I don't need this in my life because it's making me feel bad. And I think that is for a lot of people, but they can't leave, or they don't want to leave just because of the especially with the newer tech companies, Facebook, TikTok, it just keeps giving you stuff that you want to click on instead of where it used to be more of you find your own thing. So because of that, and because Instagram is so peer focused, you start comparing yourself a lot, and that just leads you down a bad path of mental health. So I think the concern that social media's impact on youth mental health can be negative is definitely true, and you should try to avoid that if at all possible.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, interesting how the comparison factor really comes up a lot, and that I know that some of the platforms are experimenting with taking away likes buttons and giving you options to be able to hide comments. which I think they see as a strategy to help with mental health. I think the verdict is still out on whether or not that people like that and if that makes an impact. But it's great that you're just self-aware, and I think that it takes time and it takes sometimes difficult experiences to get self-awareness about the negative impacts. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we can mentor younger teens and tweens in developing that self-awareness more quickly. And I just also want to acknowledge that I think we all would agree that there's a lot of positives to social media and that there's a reason that we go on it every day. And it's been a lifeline for many of us during this pandemic. And so it's really about how can we minimize the negative impacts in order to amplify the positive. So I know some of you here have taken that to heart and developed a project around it, which I've had the pleasure of working with you on, called Good for Media. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that project and tie it into this conversation we're having and why it's important and what is it. So tell us what it is.
Yeah, so I can start. Good for Media is a project I'm really excited about. I, along with Zoe, Kira, Vicki, and then 2 other staff from the Stanford Center for Youth Mental Health and Wellbeing, shout out to Neha and Song. We started it over the summer, and it just stemmed from this interest in the relationship between social media and our mental health. And as Joshua and Jeremy have shared, how like the negatives, like we acknowledge social media can be negative, but our main goal in Good for Media is try to take all the positives and just use social media to actually benefit youth mental health, whether it's like that social interaction aspect or whatever it is. And so we're trying to do this through like discussion and education. So discussion in the themes that are being shown on our website. These are all topics that can affect youth mental health when they go on social media. And just by discussing these and just trying to break down this stigma of, oh my gosh, like this is actually a really real thing that impacts me. We try to help youth come and enhance their relationship with social media. And all of this comes from peers. We ask older teens and young adults to kind of share their advice. And that's why we call it a peer mentoring campaign. It's by peers and it's for youth. And we really hope that young people will feel more empowered to engage in a healthy relationship with social media, become more aware of their actions through discussion and interaction with this project.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of what Emily said, just trying to encourage a more healthy relationship with social media. Also, a big part of it for me is the destigmatizing the conversation. On our website, you already saw some of the video submissions, but we're also encouraging people to talk about it through other media forms like art or poetry and other things like that. So we just kind of want any way possible for people to sort of step out of their comfort zone and start thinking about these topics that are sometimes kind of hard to talk about, and really just kind of start a conversation about it so that it's more normalized going forward. Because as Vicki was saying, like social media is a really big part of our lives now. It's been a really big part of mine, especially during the pandemic, and it's not really going anywhere. So it's good that we learn how to improve our relationships now and going forward so that it's just overall a positive experience.
Yeah, I really think that Emily and Kira summed it up really well. I guess I would also like really emphasize that on top of like starting a conversation, I think sort of specifically within those discussions, we're really like encouraging people to obviously be real with like the struggles and the parts of social media that are hard, but also giving people room to kind of give tips or strategies to be able to kind of manage it better, because I think that we're all working on it. And sort of, even if like I've even found that certain videos that I have seen of people on the site have really like inspired me to think about social media differently, or looking at sort of some of the specific themes and thinking about kind of how they've impacted me and hearing how they've impacted others. And I think that even just sort of knowing that it does impact other people has changed things for me. I mean, I feel like when I was on, like, I use Instagram, and there are certain like things that I'll think about before I post something. And we have, like, right now we have the theme of body image and sexualization going on. And so we have a challenge where you're supposed to sort of post a picture where you feel confident about yourself and then answer sort of one of our prompted questions. And so I actually did this on my personal account, and it was really scary because it's not something that we really like. At the end of the day, we aren't really just our full, genuine selves on social media very often. And so I posted a picture where I felt confident, and I kind of talked about like my thought process when I'm deciding to post a picture of myself. And that was really scary in the first place. But then what really surprised me was kind of how much positive reaction I got from that. And a lot of people were feeling the same way. And there were people who wanted to do the challenge, but still felt like that was sort of too open for them to be on social media. And I think that even just like now having put that out there when I'm on social media and kind of am scrolling through people's accounts and like maybe starting to wonder if I want to compare myself, or starting to think about like whether they are putting like their full selves forward and why am I not doing that, or anything, like just feeling like people relate to me and kind of could at the very least respect what I was putting out there and have so many people agree with it. I think was really powerful. And so I'm really excited about the idea that Good for Media can do that sort of for other people as well.
It's been amazing to work with you all on this, and I'm glad that you're getting benefit out of it just by posting yourself. But I think that it is interesting, right, as you're taking on the mentor role, how you sort of look at it differently and start to realize things about how we do interact with social media. And I really hope that the peer element is going to be appealing to other younger teens and tweens to want to listen to some of what these really wise videos say. There's been some amazing, really brilliant insights shared, which is part of what inspired me to want to start the project with you all, was just the wisdom that you all already have, just based on having to navigate this solely on your own with pretty limited guidance on how to do that. And I also just want to compliment Kira on the great graphics that she's really designed a lot of the art on the website, which is just amazing. And everyone's really done a tremendous job on it. So what would you say you are hoping to accomplish with this, and what made you really get involved and want to accomplish something with this?
Well, I first got involved and started getting interested specifically in social media and mental health, definitely over the pandemic. I think what we've touched on earlier in this discussion, where I just noticed like I am on social media so much more than I used to be. My friends are all on social media so much more than they used to be. And they're just telling me like, oh my gosh, this pandemic, like my mental health, I just feel like it's declining. And I was just really interested in seeing like, what can we do about it and what's going on? And so I reached out, and I'm really happy that there's other people who are interested in too. And so that's kind of how I got into Good for Media. But what I hope to accomplish is just building this positive and honest community. And I think we've already started to do that. As Zoe said, like there's been just so much good reception and so much insight from peers that I'm just so happy to be able to learn from and share my experience as well. So I really hope that this positive peer-to-peer community aspect is long-lasting.
Yeah. So I personally got involved with this campaign actually through Zoe. She had reached out to me and told me a little bit about the project. And originally I was just sort of helping with like brainstorming funny names for the project or thinking about what sort of themes would be a good idea. But the more I started helping her, the more I realized, wait, this is a topic I actually really, really care about. It's something that I've struggled with in the past a lot. It took me a while personally to really get down that balance with social media use. So then I kind of joined the team, and the rest is history. And personally, what I really hope this campaign accomplishes is just, I don't know, help people get more comfortable on social media. I know we talked a little bit earlier about how participating in the challenge sort of really put us out of our comfort zones, and it was definitely like really weird to put all of that stuff out there for like such a large audience to read. But I've just noticed for myself, at least, like I already feel a little bit different when I go on my social media accounts. Like I feel like I've already done the scariest possible thing I could have done, so everything else just kind of seems easy at this point. So I'm just hoping that, like, even if it's like just one or two people who get that same reaction from participating in the challenge or listening to other people's stories, like I definitely think I would consider it a success. So
Yeah, I really agree with both of them. I also think that one of the things that I have just like really, like, I really appreciate all the discussion about it, but I also really do appreciate kind of the tips and strategies that people are offering to sort of push, like to both help our, as individuals, our interactions with social media, and to sort of push social media in maybe a more positive or healthy direction. For example, like, I think that we have kind of talked about before, like making sure, like, for as we are in our body image and sexualization theme, we've kind of talked about how important it is to like follow accounts that are positive about kind of all types of bodies, and that you are seeing all types of bodies on your account in a positive light. And I think that just for people who haven't heard that, or if there are accounts that are positive or that make you, like, even if you're not really thinking about it, I just think that it ends up making a really big difference. And I just hope that that can happen for other people. Like for myself, like when I initially was on Instagram, like I feel like a lot of my feed was not making me feel very good about my body, or I was doing a lot of comparing. And then I ended up like trying to seek out other more positive accounts, and I found them, and now I feel way better about going on my feed. And I just hope that like little tips and strategies like that can sort of get spread more widely, so that people can sort of enjoy their social media experience more, and so that the accounts that are helping people enjoy their experience get more traction and get more followers, and that maybe we move away from some of these accounts or ideas that make us all feel bad, and that ultimately can kind of push social media towards being more positive for all of us, and that sort of the audience falls to the right people.
That's amazing to hear. I'm so glad that it's having such a positive experience, or it's being a positive experience for all of you. And I think that I hope people are inspired by what you've said and are going to accept the challenge to post something on the site, because I appreciate how vulnerable you've all been in taking that challenge, and it's had a positive impact on you. So everybody out there that's watching, take that challenge, post something. It doesn't have to be a video. It can be just a quote, it can be a thought, it can be art, it can be anything. So thank you for sharing all of that and for all of your hard work on this project. I also just want to ask anyone on that's watching the live stream, you're welcome to submit questions. We might have time to get to them. I'm going to throw one in that we talked about that's related to Good for Media before we get to our final question, because we have a little bit of time, which was, this is one of the big questions that we were thinking about when we launched the campaign, which is, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back again, if it was when you were getting your first phone or you were just getting on to social media? What advice would you give? Or if you have a younger sibling, what would you tell them about how to handle social media when it comes to mental health? Does anyone want to take a stab at that question?
Sure. I think the first thing I would tell myself is it is very important to stay safe online. It is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And the internet is great, and phone is great for communication, but if you waste all your time on it, you're not going to get anything done. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I have kind of two things that I would say to myself. One is that sort of, I think that on social media, community is out there, and that sometimes you have to like look for it or find the accounts that make you feel like in community and not out, but that it's there and that it matters. Like, I think that if I had been trying to find accounts that were more like fitting with aspects of myself, like sort of like as a queer person, I think that I wish that I had like known that there were more places out there that would feel more in community for me, or that I could find accounts that really lifted up that part of my identity, and that they were there even if it wasn't what everyone was looking at. And then also I think that I would definitely tell myself that like nobody, you're not seeing anybody's whole life on social media, and that I think that matters in that you can't really compare your life to someone else's life based on their social media, and it matters because I don't think you can really tell how someone's doing based on their social media. And so I think that both like for myself, making sure I'm not comparing, and also still knowing that like even if someone's life looks perfect or really great on Instagram or something, that it never really hurts to kind of check in or make sure that people are doing okay, because we aren't our full selves on social media. And I wish that I had kind of known that earlier.
I completely agree with what Zoe and Jeremy said. Something I'd like to add that I wish I knew is just that it's okay if you don't want to participate in social media as much as other people. I know personally I was kind of late to the game with getting certain accounts, and I always felt so left out because everyone like had their Instagram or Snapchat and I just like didn't, and it definitely did make me feel like I was kind of excluded. So I would just tell myself like it's okay to not have the same accounts as everyone else. Like just do what you're comfortable with. Like you're not actually missing out on that much, and it's okay just to get accounts as you become more and more comfortable with using social media.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, like I would definitely tell my younger self that, you know, you're under no obligation to follow certain people. Like sometimes when you grow up, you feel there's like the etiquette, right? You're like, oh, they follow me, so I should probably follow them back or something like that. And I would just say that if there's someone out there that's maybe you don't feel comfortable with, you don't have to put yourself in that position where you constantly see that in your feed, or you don't have to follow certain things just because, you know, like, oh my gosh, I have so many mutuals, like I should just probably just still follow them, you know? And so building off of what Zoe said, especially about following accounts that make you feel good and are true to yourself rather than just what, you know, what shows up in your following button, and you like, oh, I don't want to see people following me, I don't want people to see that I follow this person or something like that. Like it really doesn't matter, and you should just do what's honestly best for you and unfollow if you need to.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, when I was first getting a lot of my social media accounts, I just thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to worry too much about you know, body image and beauty standards, and like to a certain extent, I don't think I've run into as many issues on that front. But also just realizing that there's so much more to this negative mindset of social media than like just body image alone. While it's a huge issue, there, you know, especially on Twitter, my drug of choice, just like people endlessly talking about their accomplishments, and crafting this narrative of their lives. And so for me to realize that like Twitter is not real life, and that I need to stop doom scrolling, which is a fantastic term. I think one that basically explains itself. And just, you know, realizing again that social media is very much a facade, It's very much intended to provoke something in you because that's how clicks work.
Great.
Yeah. Oh,
Do you want to
sorry.
say something, Jeremy?
Yeah. Like social media, communities there if you want to find it. But I would say like don't follow just because it's popular. Don't follow things just because it's what you think you want. Just be yourself, put yourself out there. You're gonna find people that are like you, and you're gonna make a lot of friends.
Great advice all around. I see a question that was one that we had talked about that I think would be good for you all to answer if you're comfortable. Someone asked, are there certain social media platforms you find more triggering than others? Which is similar to a question that we had, which is like, what type of media do you choose to consume? Because maybe you found that some is less supportive of your mental health and you feel bad using it when you feel good using other platforms. Are there certain ones that you like better than others? Anyone want to tackle that?
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it, Joshua.
Sorry. I think it's a double-edged sword. The ones that are more triggering than others is often the one that's more personal than to you, right? Like to me, I can't use Instagram right now because it's everyone on there is someone someone in real life, someone in high school. While like on the other side of the spectrum, like YouTube, technically still social media, is completely anonymous. No one knows anyone. So you just have to find the right balance, I guess, like between, the different sides of the spectrum, and how comfortable are you with either side.
Yeah, I kind of going on top of what Jeremy said, I definitely think it's sort of an interesting question because, like, for me, I definitely think that Instagram, like, if there's one that will be the hardest at certain moments, it's definitely Instagram, because I think it is one of the more curated social media platforms. And it also is one where, like, if I look something up, then I very quickly, like, am getting shown a bunch of ads about it. Or if I go to my explore page, like, suddenly my feed turns into whatever I was looking up. And, like, on the one hand, it's really nice to be able to see what people are up to, and it's kind of fun to, like, curate your feed or whatever. And it's nice that you can access more and more information about something, but it also, on the flip side, can be really hard. Or like if I've had an issue where, like, if I, like, try to find a workout I want to do and on Instagram, which I like to do, and then I find one, then all of a sudden, like, my explore page becomes like health and fitness and all of these, like, tips that are not really healthy and not actually great, and that can end up being, like, really problematic. And so I think that it is sort of interesting where that is, like, a platform that I really enjoy being on when it's good, and it's one that can be really problematic for me when it's not.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. Instagram definitely is the one that causes the most problems for me. And I think it's just because there are so many sources of comparison on Instagram, particularly. You have, like, followers, following ratios, likes, like, comments, and then just, like, the perfect image that people like to create, like Zoe was saying. I also think with Instagram, you almost have to sort of work the hardest to make it a positive experience, because your feed can get so swarmed with, like, all these super healthy fit people the second you want to look at a workout video or just stuff like that. It's just so easy for your feed to completely just get absolutely swarmed by a certain, like, negative subject or topic, and then you have to spend so much time, like, saying not interested until you finally can have a feed that, like, seems well balanced and actually will, like, make you feel good when you go on it. So I would definitely say Instagram is the hardest one to navigate.
I would also agree that Instagram is definitely the platform that when you're in a negative space, it can just damage more than it benefits. One aspect I would say is that Instagram has also tried to evolve more than past a social media thing and just seeing what your peers are up to. It's also now, like, probably a secondary news source for a lot of people. And so there's all these posts circulating about current events and everything that's going on. You can just see like with the click of a button. And personally, like I sometimes just feel overwhelmed, and it can feel really heavy on my shoulders when I see, oh my gosh, another bad thing happened and another bad thing happened. And it's so easy to circulate all these messages. While they're important to know, current events are important to know, sometimes it's just really overwhelming. Everything's coming at you on just one page.
Yeah, for sure. And to add on to that, I mean, it's almost like Instagram is great for bringing attention to important causes. But to a certain extent, once you're seeing so many, there are so many different issues out there in the world that need to be addressed. And when you're seeing them again and again, it can lead to activism burnout, which is, I think, something that doesn't get acknowledged quite enough. And for me, like the approach I took to Instagram, and I still take, is this sounds sort of bad, but I just leave most people on like request. So I have like 200 people I need to request who are like requested to follow me that I just ignore. And to the people who requested to follow me, I'm so sorry. But like it's just, I think it's better for me that I keep my followers and like my following to a really low number. So that way, first, it's less addictive. And then when I'm just scrolling through, it's really easy for me to just put it down because my feed is not all that long, actually.
Great advice. I love all of that advice, and I hope our colleagues at Instagram are listening to some of that feedback. We shouldn't have to work that hard to have a positive experience on social media. So it's really great insight. I know we're getting low on time. There's a few questions in here, and we had one final one we were all going to ask, but I wanted to just see if anyone wanted to ask the question about what advice you would give your parents or give parents who are concerned about their child's social media use. Anyone want to offer anything on that?
I can give it a shot. I guess, firstly, I always take the position that it's good to just sort of open a conversation about it. And I think doing that in a way that is just sort of genuinely curious, like I think asking about, you can even say like, in a very nice, non-judgmental way, like I've noticed that you're spending a lot of time on social media, like, what do you like about it? Or what do you feel like you get from it? Just like really opening the door to like starting a conversation about it. And I think that if you're getting anything from this conversation and like from our project, Good for Media, I would hope that parents could start to see that there really are a lot of benefits to social media and a lot of things that are hard. And I think it should be treated as an issue that is that complicated, especially during the pandemic, where the truth is like, we aren't having the same access to our friends as we normally would. And, there are all these studies coming out about like how many adolescents are struggling with loneliness, even more than usual. And I think that social media is really imperfect, but I think right now it's one of the main ways that we have to connect. So I guess I would kind of caution parents against, especially right now, against sort of trying to control how much time their kids are spending on social media or on their phones, because like, even though it's not perfect connection, it's kind of our only way to access it. But I do think that it's important to also bring up the concerns and the parts of social media that are hard. And like, Good for Media is all about opening a discussion about what's hard about social media. And there's no reason that that can't be happening between parents and their children. It doesn't have to just be around peers. But I think that doing it in an open, accepting, as non-judgmental as you can kind of way is important, but it's definitely just a conversation to be had.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Zoe said. Just building off of that a little bit, I think a lot of times when parents or like authority figures approach conversations about using social media, it's often from a perspective of like, oh, you're on your phone too much, or you're on social media too much. It's always just like, almost like a you versus them sort of a conversation, when in reality it should be more of a like, let's work on this together. Let's see how we can make this a better experience for you. I know in high school they would show us like these super scary videos of what was going to happen to your brain if you like went on social media too much. And basically the whole message was just like, just don't use social media. But that's not really the solution, because this is now a necessary part of our lives for us to stay connected to those around us. So I would just say my biggest piece of advice for parents would just be approach the conversation from a perspective of collaboration and wanting to work together, and things should go good.
Great. Thank you. It's really good advice. I hope some parents are listening to that. So I think we're just going to go to our final question, which each of you was going to give a quick answer to, which is, given all that we've said and all you've experienced in your own lives and your own social media and media consumption, how do you hope media will look different 5 or 10 years from now? What do you want it to look like? I think Joshua was going to start.
Sure. I mean, I don't know necessarily if we can push the social media platforms themselves in the right direction. I think there is just, intrinsically a lot more profit to be made from making people like feel something extremely viscerally. But that being said, I hope 5 to 10 years from now, we have more people who are approaching social media with a more nuanced mindset, recognizing all of the pitfalls out there, recognizing the dichotomy that, social media can be wonderful and fantastic, but social media also has this dark side to it. So really it's not, I think, for the platforms, but it's more for the users themselves to reflect that mindset shift in 5 to 10 years.
I'll go next. I hope that media generally, like social media in particular, can be a space where like people truly can be their most genuine selves, and where it doesn't have to be so curated, or there isn't these like complicated aspects of it, these followers. I mean, like obviously we're going to have that, but I wish that it didn't sort of have the importance that it does. Like, I don't know why we need to see the number, like I just wish that it was a place where people feel like they could be genuine, and then people can see exactly what they want to see on their social media. And for media in general, I just hope that we sort of are able to see all walks of life, and all in a much more kind of genuine and out there way, and that we're not sort of usually seeing one side of the story, or just that there's more of everything kind of out there in a way that's still like genuine, or more genuine. It's not that genuine. But yeah, I guess that's what I hope.
Jeremy?
Yeah. Oh, I thought my camera was frozen. I only have like one small thing because everyone already said so much. Just, it's been on the news lately, but like tracking, targeting for minors, especially at like a time where you get very attached to things. I think the companies should just not do that. They know how old you are. They can just not track you. I don't know why none of them are doing that. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Emily?
Yeah, I would say I agree with everyone, and I especially agree with Joshua when he said it's more about like the mentality we have as consumers of social media, where like thinking 5 to 10 years ago of what social media was, I was not even on it, but like I see screenshots or like whatever of old social media, and it was very much like you post your daily life, and it felt a little more authentic. And as the platform has grown and expanded in its capabilities, it becomes more curated or whatever. So I hope that it shows that there can be a mentality shift in the people to, well, where it was more genuine, now it's maybe not. So then I hope, again, people can be more honest and transparent about what's going on, and in media in general, just being more considerate of the implication of your words and how widespread social media and media can be, and realizing the impacts it has on individual people and giving that ounce of humanity and as a whole person back.
Yeah, I think everyone had really great things to say. For me personally, I think it'd be really cool if social media was more customizable in the future. So like you can control whether you see likes or not. You can control whether you see followers or not. Because I just think generally what I've been getting from this conversation is social media impacts us all in different ways, whether it be positive or negative, but we should be in control of how that will go. It shouldn't have to be so hard to make social media a positive experience. And I think if apps started having more flexible settings, it would just be really, really great for everyone's experience, and we could just kind of automatically put ourselves in the best position possible to have a good experience on social media.
Perfect last words. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, everyone. We're right at time. And I just want to thank you all so much for all the great advice and wisdom you shared. And to everyone who's watching, thank you. You can hopefully follow Good for Media to hear more, and also our Stanford Youth MH handles. Thank you so much.